Ambassador Dongmin stood at the center of the massive council chamber. The room was so large that clouds formed near the ceiling. Around him sat the representatives of 200 alien species. Their eyes watched him with barely hidden contempt. Some whispered to each other in languages that hurt human ears to hear. The Galactic Council had been humanity's dream for over a century. When the first alien ship landed on Earth, humans thought they were finally joining something bigger. They thought they would learn and grow alongside ancient civilizations that had traveled the stars for millions of years. They were wrong. Dongmin looked up at Overlord Vexithara, the leader of the hegemony species. Vexithara's body was made of what looked like living crystal. Light passed through him in strange ways that made humans dizzy. His voice echoed from everywhere at once when he spoke. "The human delegation has requested to address this council," Vexithara said. His tone made it clear he thought this was a waste of time. "Speak quickly, young species. We have important matters to discuss." Young species. That was what they always called humans. It did not matter that humans had been council members for 150 years. It did not matter that human colonies now existed on 300 worlds. To these ancient beings, humans were still children who had just learned to walk between the stars. Dongmin took a deep breath. He had practiced this speech for months. Behind him, his aide Kyung-ho held a small device that would record everything. This moment would be remembered forever. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Dongmin began. "Humanity has served in this body for 6 generations. We have followed every law. We have paid every tax. We have sent our ships to fight in your wars and our people to die for council decisions." A sound like breaking glass came from the Crystalline Collective's section. They were laughing. Dongmin continued without stopping. "In return, we have been denied access to basic technologies that other species take for granted. Our trade requests are rejected. Our colonies are restricted to worlds that others consider worthless. When we ask for help, we are told to be patient. When we offer help, we are told to stay quiet." Overlord Vexithara's crystal body flashed with annoyed colors. "The human species lacks the wisdom to handle advanced technologies. Your lifespans are too short. Your minds are too simple. The Council protects you from yourselves." "Protects us?" Dongmin's voice stayed calm, but his hands clenched into fists. "Last year, when the plague hit our colony on Kepler 442b, we begged for medical assistance. The Council said the cure was too dangerous for humans to use. 20,000 people died while we waited for approval that never came. The chamber erupted in angry sounds. The plasma lords hissed like fire. The gas giants rumbled like distant thunder. The bioforms clicked and chittered in their section. "That cure would have killed more humans than it saved," came a voice from the medical union section. "Your biology is too primitive." "Too primitive," Dongmin repeated. "Yes, we have heard that before. When we asked to study faster than light travel, we were told our minds could not understand it. When we requested permission to trade with the Outer Rim territories, we were told our culture was not advanced enough. When we applied to join the technology sharing program, we were rejected because our species is too young." He paused and looked around the vast chamber. Thousands of alien eyes stared back at him. Most looked bored, some looked angry, none looked sympathetic. "Today, I bring you a simple message from Earth and all human colonies," Dongmin said. "We are withdrawing from the Galactic Council." The chamber fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the station's power systems. Then the noise exploded like a bomb. Aliens shouted in hundreds of languages. Some laughed, others roared in anger. Overlord Vexithara raised one crystal arm. The chamber slowly became quiet again. "Withdrawing?" His voice carried amusement. "Humans cannot survive outside the Council's protection. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your ships are slow and weak. Your weapons are primitive metal projectiles. Without Council protection, you will be conquered by pirates or slavers within a year." Dongmin smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps we will fail, but we will fail as free beings, not as children begging for scraps from your table." He turned to leave, but Vexithara's voice stopped him. "If you walk away now, you cannot return. The Council does not take back species that abandon their duties. Your trade agreements will end. Your protection treaties will be cancelled. Your Colonies will be declared open territory for any species that wants them. We understand, Dongmen said without turning around. We also understand that the Council will vote to strip us of our remaining rights, whether we stay or go. The vote is scheduled for tomorrow, is it not? Silence again. The Overlord's crystal body flashed angry red colors. Dongmin walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the huge chamber. Behind him, Kyung-ho followed quietly. At the door, Dongmin stopped and looked back one last time. There is one thing you should know, he said. Humanity thanks the Council for teaching us an important lesson. You have shown us that we cannot depend on others for our survival. You have taught us that we must be strong enough to stand alone. For that education we are grateful. The massive doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. 3 days later, every human colony in the galaxy went silent at exactly the same time. It happened during what humans called midnight Earth Standard Time. One moment, human ships were talking to each other across hundreds of star systems. The next moment, nothing. Council investigators found the colonies empty. Not destroyed, not damaged, just empty. Landing pads still had warm teacups sitting on tables. Machines were still running, but every human was gone. The investigators searched for months. They found no bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of where billions of humans had gone. It was as if they had simply vanished into space. The Council decided that humanity had tried to relocate and failed. Their primitive ships had probably broken down in deep space. Within a year, most Council members had forgotten about the strange little species that had walked away from civilization. They divided up human territory among themselves. The rich mining worlds went to the most powerful species. Earth itself became a nature preserve for the bioforms to study. Only a few beings remembered Ambassador Dongmin's final words. They wondered what kind of lesson humanity thought they had learned. But time passed, and even those few forgot. The galaxy moved on without humans. Trade continued. Wars were fought and ended. New species joined the Council. The great machine of galactic civilization ground forward as it had for millions of years. No one noticed the small ships that appeared at the edge of sensor range, watched for a while, and then disappeared. No one paid attention to the strange signals that came from empty space. No one wondered why certain asteroids seemed to move in patterns that made no sense. The humans were gone. The Council was stronger without them. That was what everyone believed. They were wrong about many things. 50 years had passed since the humans disappeared. The Galactic Council called it the Golden Age. Trade was at an all-time high. Wars between member species had almost stopped. The Great Council Chamber on Nexus Prime had been rebuilt twice to hold all the new members who wanted to join. Overlord Zephyrian stood where his predecessor had once ruled. Unlike Vexithara, Zephyrian was made of pure energy contained in a floating sphere. When he spoke, his voice came from the air itself, vibrating through every molecule in the chamber. Today marks 50 years of unbroken prosperity. Zephyrian announced to the assembled delegates, our expansion into former human territories has yielded resources beyond our greatest expectations. The primitive species that once cluttered these worlds has been replaced by proper civilization. The delegates cheered. The sound echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. In the front rows sat the Crystalline Collective, now controlling 17 human star systems. Behind them, the Plasma Lords had claimed 12 worlds rich in rare metals. Even the smaller species had gotten something from humanity's former empire. Earth itself had become a tourist destination. The bioforms had turned it into a living museum, preserving the strange creatures that humans had called animals. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the blue world where the extinct species had been born. In the back corner of the chamber, almost hidden among the newer delegates, sat Mi Young. She was not like the others. Her species, the archivists, were small and quiet. They lived only to record history and preserve knowledge. Most council members forgot the archivists existed, but Mi Young remembered everything. She had been there, 50 years ago when Ambassador Dongmin made his final speech. She had recorded every word, every gesture, every expression on his face. Something about that day bothered her. After the ceremony ended, Mi Young returned to her small office in the lower levels of Nexus Prime. The walls were covered with data screens showing historical records from across the galaxy. She spent her days organizing information that other species were too busy to care about. Tonight she pulled up the human files again. She had read them hundreds of times, but something always felt wrong. The records showed a primitive species that had struggled to build basic starships. Their technology was crude, their weapons were simple, their society was chaotic and violent. Yet somehow, these primitive beings had evacuated billions of people from hundreds of worlds in a single night. They had done it without leaving a trace. No council species could manage such a feat, even with all their advanced technology. Mi Young opened a new file. It contained reports from the past year that she had been collecting, strange reports that no one else seemed to think were important. A trading convoy had vanished near the outer rim. Security forces found the ships floating empty in space, cargo intact, crews gone. The official report blamed equipment failure. A research station studying ancient ruins had stopped responding to communications. When investigators arrived, they found the station clean and empty. All research data was gone, but the computers still worked perfectly. The official report blamed solar radiation. 3 mining operations in different sectors had reported the same thing. Their automated systems had detected ships in the area, but scans showed empty space. When human supervisors went to investigate, they found nothing. The official report blamed sensor malfunctions. Mi Young cross-referenced the locations. All of them were in or near former human territory. All of them had happened in the past 2 years, and all of them had been dismissed by council investigators as unimportant accidents. She pulled up another file. This one contained audio recordings from long-range sensor stations. Most were routine traffic control messages between ships. But buried in the data, Mi Young had found something interesting. Strange signals that appeared for a few seconds and then stopped. The signals used no known communication protocol. They seemed random, like static or equipment noise. But when Mi Young analyzed them with pattern recognition software, she found something that made her hands shake. The signals contained mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions, and other patterns that could only be artificial. Someone was sending coded messages through seemingly random noise. More importantly, the signals always appeared just before something strange happened. A convoy would go missing 3 days after a signal was detected in their area. A research station would go silent a week after strange transmissions were recorded nearby. Mi Young stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see the lights of Nexus Prime stretching to the horizon. Millions of beings lived and worked on this artificial world. Ships came and went every hour, carrying trade goods across the galaxy. Everything looked peaceful and prosperous, but something was watching. Something was moving in the darkness between stars, something that could make entire crews disappear without a trace. She thought about Ambassador Dongmin's final words. "You have shown us that we cannot depend on others for our survival. You have taught us that we must be strong enough to stand alone. What if the humans had not died in space? What if they had succeeded in relocating? What if they had spent 50 years becoming something else? Something stronger?" Mi Young activated her personal communication device. She needed to contact someone who would listen, someone who would take her concerns seriously. But who? The council leadership was too arrogant to admit they might have made a mistake. The military commanders were too busy enjoying peacetime to worry about theoretical threats. Before she could decide, her computer chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as unknown. The message contained only a single line of text. "The archivists see what others ignore. Some truths are too dangerous to record." Mi Young stared at the screen. Someone was watching her. Someone knew what she had been researching. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, trying to trace the message source. But the signal had already vanished, leaving no trail to follow. She looked at her files again. Months of careful research, hundreds of strange reports, patterns that pointed to something moving in the darkness. Should she delete everything? Should she pretend she had never noticed the signals, never connected the disappearances? Or should she dig deeper? Mi Young made her choice. She opened a new file and began typing a report. If something was out there, if the humans were still alive and planning something, the galaxy needed to know. The Council's golden age might be built on false assumptions. As she worked, she did not notice the small device attached to her window. It was almost invisible, no bigger than a grain of sand. The device recorded everything she typed, every file she opened, every connection she made. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone was watching, someone was learning, and someone was waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy that humans were never as primitive as they seemed. The Golden Age was about to end, but the Council did not know it yet. They were too busy celebrating their success to notice, the shadows growing longer around them. In her small office, Mi Young typed through the night. She documented every strange signal, every mysterious disappearance, every pattern that pointed to something impossible. She was an archivist. Her job was to preserve the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. She just hoped someone would read her report before it was too late. Commander Veltar stared at the empty space where Outpost Gamma 7 should have been. His ship, the Council cruiser Eternal Vigilance, floated in a perfect void. No debris, no radiation signatures, no trace that millions of beings had lived and worked here just 3 days ago. "Run another deep scan," he ordered his sensor operator. The young crystalline officer's faceted body flickered with concentration as she worked her controls. "Still nothing, Commander," she reported. "It's like the outpost was never here. Even the asteroid it was built on is gone." Veltar's 4 arms crossed over his chest. As a member of the Warcast species, he had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. He had seen ships destroyed, stations bombed, entire fleets wiped out by enemy action. But he had never seen anything like this. This was the 7th installation that had vanished in the past 6 months. All of them were on the outer rim, far from the Council's core worlds. All of them had disappeared completely, leaving not even dust behind. "Commander," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from Council Command." Veltar walked over to the main display screen. Overlord Zephyrian's energy form appeared, crackling with impatience. "Commander Veltar, what is your status? Have you found any evidence of what happened to Gamma 7? "Nothing, Overlord," Veltar replied. "The outpost has been completely removed. No debris field, no energy residue, no signs of battle. Whatever did this had power beyond our understanding." Zephyrian's energy form flickered with what might have been annoyance. "Commander, you are chasing shadows. These installations probably suffered equipment failures. Their reactors exploded and vaporized everything. There is no evidence of hostile action. With respect, Overlord, 7 reactor failures in 6 months, all in the same region, all with identical results. The probability of that happening naturally is... The probability is irrelevant," Zephyrian cut him off. "The Council has more important matters to address than technical failures on remote outposts. Return to Nexus Prime immediately." The connection ended. Veltar stood silently for a moment, his 4 hands clenched into fists. Around the bridge, his crew watched him carefully. They all knew what he was thinking. "Set course for Nexus Prime," he finally ordered. "But first I want to visit one more location." His navigation officer looked up. "Commander, take us to the coordinates where Research Station Delta 12 disappeared last month. I want to see something." 20 minutes later, they arrived at another empty region of space, but this time Veltar had his crew perform a different kind of scan. Instead of looking for debris or energy signatures, they searched for gravitational anomalies. "There," his science officer announced. "Microgravitational distortions in a perfect grid pattern. Whatever was here, it was massive and symmetrical." Veltar studied the data. The distortions showed where a large structure had once been. But, more importantly, they showed something else. "Look at the edge patterns," he told his crew. "Those aren't natural formations. Something cut the station free from its moorings, cut it clean and precise, like a surgeon removing an organ." His communications officer, a young female named So-Jin from the Trade Guild species, raised her hand nervously. "Commander, there's something else. I've been monitoring long-range communications, and I've noticed some strange patterns." "What kind of patterns?" So-Jin activated her display. "Random bursts of static that appear on multiple frequencies. They only last a few seconds, and they seem meaningless. But when I run them through cryptographic analysis..." The display showed a series of mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions, and complex patterns that could not be natural. "Someone is sending coded messages," Veltar said. quietly. These signals appear before each disappearance, don't they? So Jin nodded. 3 days before each incident, these signals appear in the local area. Then they stop, and a few days later, something vanishes. Veltar walked to the front viewport and stared out at the stars. In the distance, he could see the faint glow of the galactic core where the Council's most powerful species lived in comfort and luxury. They thought the outer rim was empty wasteland, good only for mining operations and research stations. But something was moving out here. Something intelligent, organized, and powerful. Something that could make entire installations disappear without leaving a trace. Sojin, he said without turning around, have you heard of the humans? The young officer looked confused. Humans? You mean the primitive species that died out 75 years ago? They didn't die out. They left. And before they left, their ambassador said something interesting. He thanked the council for teaching them that they had to be strong enough to stand alone. Veltar turned back to his crew. What if they learned that lesson? What if they spent 75 years becoming something we wouldn't recognize? His sensor operator laughed. Commander, the humans were barely capable of interplanetary travel. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were primitive. Their technology was centuries behind ours. Even if they survived, they would still be using chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Would they? Veltar asked. The humans had one advantage that most council species lack. They learned fast. They adapted quickly. They took ideas from everywhere and made them better. He pulled up a historical file on his personal display. Did you know that in the 200 years before they joined the council, humans went from using animal power to splitting atoms? In 50 years, they went from ground-based telescopes to landing on their moon. In 20 years, they went from basic computers to artificial intelligence. The bridge fell silent as his crew absorbed this information. Now imagine what they could accomplish with council technology as a starting point. Not just copying it, but understanding it, improving it, making it their own. Give them 75 years of focused development, and they might become something we couldn't imagine. So, Jin raised her hand again. Commander, if the humans are responsible for these disappearances, why haven't they contacted us? Why haven't they announced their return? Veltar smiled grimly. Because they're smart. They're testing our defenses, studying our capabilities, learning our weaknesses. They're preparing for something big. He walked back to his command chair. Set course for the next disappearance site, but do it quietly. I don't want this information reaching Council Command until we know more. Commander, his science officer said nervously, if you're right, if the humans are out there, what do you think they want? Veltar thought about Ambassador Dong Min's final speech. The man had been polite, dignified, even respectful. But there had been something else in his eyes. Not anger, not hatred, but disappointment. The deep disappointment of someone who had trusted others and been betrayed. I think they want to come home, Veltar said quietly. But first, they want to make sure no one can stop them. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, none of the crew noticed the small probe that detached from their hull. It was no bigger than a coffee cup, painted the same color as space itself. The probe watched the Council ship disappear into hyperspace, then activated its own tiny engine and flew away into the darkness. Somewhere in the void between stars, Jinwoo received the probe's data transmission. He sat in the command center of a ship that should not have been possible. The walls were made of materials that bent light around them. The engines used principles that the Council had declared impossible. The weapons could unmake matter at the molecular level. So the Council is finally starting to notice, he said to his crew. Commander Veltar is smarter than most of them. He might actually figure out what's happening. His science officer, so young, looked up from her instruments. Should we eliminate his ship? It would be easy to arrange an accident. Jinwoo shook his head. No, let him investigate. Let him learn. When the time comes, we'll need people like him to help rebuild the galaxy into something better. He stood up and walked to the main display, which showed a map of the outer rim. Red markers indicated the locations they had already visited. Blue markers showed their next targets. How long until the fleet is ready? He asked. Another year, maybe 2, So Young replied. The construction. Yards are working at full capacity, but we want everything perfect before we reveal ourselves. Jinwoo nodded. Good. The Council has had 75 years to enjoy their golden age. Soon they'll learn what humans can accomplish when they're properly motivated. Outside the ship, hidden in the darkness of space, 1,000 other vessels waited. They were beautiful and terrible, built with technologies that should not have existed. Each one carried crews who had been born among the stars, raised with the knowledge that someday they would return to reclaim what had been stolen from them. The humans had not forgotten. They had not forgiven. And they were almost ready to come home. The alarms started screaming across Nexus Prime at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. In the Great Council chamber, emergency lights flashed red as delegates scrambled to understand what was happening. Admiral Jae-sung stood on the bridge of the human flagship New Earth and watched the chaos unfold on his main screen. The ship hung in space 10,000 kilometers from the Council station, its hull reflecting light in ways that hurt alien eyes to look at. "Status report," he said calmly to his crew. "All fleet groups in position," reported his tactical officer, Captain Young-ho. 750 ships surrounding every major Council world. They haven't detected most of us yet. Communications? "Standing by, Admiral," said Lieutenant Yoon-ji from her station. "Ready to broadcast on all frequencies." Jae-sung nodded. Through the viewport, he could see other human ships materializing out of what had seemed like empty space. Their cloaking technology was perfect, based on principles that the Council believed were impossible. On Nexus Prime, Overlord Zephyrian's energy form crackled with panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Massive ships had appeared, without warning near the Council's most important worlds. Ships that used no known technology. Ships that had somehow bypassed every defense system in the galaxy. "How is this possible?" Zephyrian demanded of his military advisors. "Our sensors show empty space 1 second, then hundreds of unknown vessels the next second. Where did they come from?" Commander Veltar, who had been summoned back to Nexus Prime to report on his investigation, stepped forward. "Overlord, I believe these are human ships." The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Delegates from dozens of species shouted in protest. The idea was impossible. Humans were extinct. Even if they weren't, their technology was primitive compared to Council standards. "Impossible!" roared the representative from the Plasma Lords. "Humans could barely build chemical rockets. These ships show technology centuries ahead of anything in Council databases." Veltar activated his personal display. "With permission, I'd like to show the Council what I've discovered in the past 75 years. His screen filled with data. Disappearance reports, strange signals, gravitational anomalies. All the evidence he had been collecting while the Council ignored. His warnings. "The pattern is clear," he said. "Someone has been systematically removing our installations from the outer rim. Not destroying them, removing them. Taking them somewhere for study, learning our capabilities, our weaknesses, our technology." Before anyone could respond, every screen in the chamber flickered and changed. A human face appeared, middle-aged and calm, with eyes that seemed to look directly at each viewer. "Greetings, Galactic Council," Admiral Jae-sung said. His voice was clear and strong, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "I am Admiral Jae-sung of the Human Federation. We have returned." The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. On the screen, the Admiral continued speaking. 75 years ago, your Council made it clear that humanity had no place among the civilized species of the galaxy. You called us primitive. You said our minds were too simple, our lives too short, our technology too crude. You were wrong." The image shifted to show the human fleet surrounding Nexus Prime. Sleek ships that seemed to bend space around them. Vessels that moved without visible engines. Weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. While you celebrated your golden age, we learned. We adapted. We evolved. The technology you said we were too primitive to understand became the foundation. For advances you cannot imagine. Overlord Zephyrian's energy form flared with anger. "What do you want? Revenge? Conquest? We will not surrender to a species of upstart children." Jae-sung smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not entirely kind either. "We want justice, Overlord. For 75 years you have occupied our worlds. You have treated our former territories as your private property. You have built an empire on resources that were stolen from us. Stolen? The Crystalline Collective's representative stood up, her body flashing with indignation. Your species abandoned those worlds. You left them empty. We simply made use of waste space. We left because you made it clear we had no choice, Jae Sung replied. But we never abandoned our claim to what was ours. We simply went somewhere you couldn't follow us. On the bridge of New Earth, Captain Young-ho leaned over to his admiral. Sir, the Council fleet is moving to attack positions. 50 ships, closing on our location. Let them come, Jae Sung said calmly. Yunji, activate the demonstration protocol. On Nexus Prime, the Council delegates watched their screens in horror as their finest warships approached the human fleet. The Eternal Vigilance, the ship that had carried Commander Veltar on his investigations, led the charge with its weapons powered and ready. Then something impossible happened. The human ships didn't fire back. They didn't move to defend themselves. Instead, they simply became more real. That was the only way Council minds could understand it. The human ships had been visible before, but now they became solid, substantial, present in a way that made reality itself seem to bend around them. The Council weapons struck the human hulls and simply stopped. Energy beams that could melt asteroids faded to nothing when they touched human armor. Missiles that could crack planets exploded harmlessly against barriers that shouldn't have existed. Then the human ships struck back, but they didn't use weapons. Instead, they reached out with invisible hands and gently grasped the Council vessels. The great warships, each one large enough to carry 10,000 crew members, stopped moving. Their engines shut down. Their weapons powered off. Their life support systems remained active, but everything else simply stopped working. How? Whispered the Plasma Lord representative. How is this possible? On the screen, Admiral Jae Sung looked directly at him. Your technology is based on brute force. Bigger engines, stronger weapons, thicker armor. Our technology is based on understanding. We don't overpower reality. We convince it to work with us instead. He gestured, and the image changed again. Now it showed the inside of a human ship. The corridors were filled with beings who looked human, but moved with impossible grace. Their eyes held intelligence that seemed too deep for any mortal mind. We have conquered death itself, Jae Sung continued. Our consciousness can be backed up, restored, transferred between bodies. We have learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level. We can fold space, reverse time, rewrite the laws of physics in small areas around our ships. Commander Veltar stared at the screen with growing understanding. That's how you made our stations disappear. You didn't destroy them. You moved them somewhere else, somewhere outside normal space. Very good, Commander, Jae Sung nodded approvingly. We needed to study your current technology. We also needed to relocate the beings living on those stations to safety before we revealed ourselves. We have no wish to harm innocent people. Overlord Zephyrian's energy form flickered with confusion. What do you mean, relocated them to safety? The image changed one more time. Now it showed vast cities floating in space, filled with millions of Council citizens who had supposedly disappeared over the years. They looked healthy and happy, living in environments perfectly suited to their species. We have been preparing for this day for 75 years, Jae Sung explained. Part of that preparation involved removing potential hostages from the conflict zone. Every being who vanished from the Outer Rim installations is safe and well cared for. They will be returned to their families once the transition is complete. Transition? Several delegates asked at once. Admiral Jae Sung's expression became serious. The old galaxy is ending, honored delegates. The age of species competing for limited resources is over. We offer you a choice. Join us in building something better, or retreat to your core worlds and watch the future pass you by. Around the HFY chamber, delegates looked at each other with fear and uncertainty. Some species had based their entire culture on the idea that they were superior to younger races. The thought of being led by former inferiors was almost unbearable. But others, like Commander Veltar, began to see the possibilities. A galaxy where technology advanced through cooperation instead of competition. Where species shared knowledge instead of hoarding it. Where no one was considered too primitive to deserve respect. On his ship, Admiral J. Sung waited for their answer. Around him, his crew prepared for whatever response the council might give. They had learned patience during their long exile. They could wait a little longer for the galaxy to make its choice. The age of human leadership was about to begin. Whether it would be peaceful or not depended entirely on how wise the council had become during their golden age. 6 months after the return, Prime Minister Hyun Soo stood in the newly rebuilt council chamber. The room looked very different now. Instead of towering seats that made some species look down on others, every delegate sat at the same level. The walls showed images of star systems where multiple species worked together on massive projects. The changes had not been easy. Some council species had chosen to fight rather than accept human leadership. Their fleets had been gently disabled, and their crews relocated to comfortable prison worlds until they could accept the new reality. Other species had embraced the changes immediately, eager to learn from human technology. Today we celebrate the completion of the Andromeda Gateway, Hyun Soo announced to the assembled delegates. Thanks to cooperation between 17 different species, we can now travel instantly to our neighboring galaxy. In the front row, Commander Veltar nodded approvingly. He now wore the uniform of the Galactic Cooperation Fleet, a joint organization that included the best minds from every species. His ship had been upgraded with human technology, making it faster and more powerful than anything the old council had possessed. Beside him sat Mi Young, who had been promoted to Chief Historical Advisor. Her careful record-keeping had helped human leaders understand which council members could be trusted and which ones needed closer supervision. The Gateway Project shows what we can accomplish when we work together, Hyun Soo continued. Human, space-folding technology, combined with crystalline energy manipulation and plasma lord power generation, has created something none of us could build alone. The chamber erupted in polite applause. Most delegates seemed genuinely pleased with the results. Trade between species had increased dramatically. Scientific discoveries that would have taken centuries now happened in years. Wars had become almost non-existent because the human fleet could respond to any conflict within hours. But not everyone was happy. In the back rows, representatives from the holdout species sat in sullen silence. The bioforms still believed that biological evolution was superior to technological advancement. The gas giants thought their ancient wisdom should not be questioned by young upstarts. The machine collective refused to acknowledge that humans had surpassed their computational abilities. After the ceremony, Hyun Soo met with his advisors in a private conference room. The walls were lined with screens showing status reports from across the galaxy. Green lights indicated successful cooperation projects. Yellow lights marked areas where tensions still existed. Red lights showed the few remaining resistance movements. "How are we doing with the integration process?" Hyun Soo asked his aide, Bo Ram. Bo Ram pulled up a holographic display showing galactic statistics. 87% of council species have joined the Cooperation Initiative. Trade efficiency is up 300%. Scientific advancement has accelerated by a factor of 10. Crime rates have dropped to historic lows. And the remaining 13%? Mostly confined to their home systems, reported Admiral Wu Jin, who commanded the peacekeeping forces. They're not causing trouble, but they're not participating either. A few are trying to develop weapons that might work against our technology. Hyun Soo frowned. Any success? None so far. Our defensive systems adapt faster than they can innovate, but we're monitoring the situation carefully. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Outer Rim. Captain So Young's face appeared on the main screen, her expression excited. "Prime Minister, we've made contact with a new species beyond the galactic edge. They call themselves the Builders. Their technology is impressive." Hyun Soo leaned forward. "How impressive?" "They've constructed a ring around their entire star to collect energy. Their ships are the size of small moons. They've been watching our galaxy for millions of years, waiting to see if we would mature enough to be worth talking to." This was news that could change everything. Humanity had become the dominant power in their galaxy, but they were still young compared to truly ancient civilizations. If the Builders decided humans were not ready for contact with older species, it could mean isolation from the greater universe. "What do they want?" Hyun-Soo asked. To meet with human leaders, So-young replied. They say they're curious about the species that managed to unite a galaxy through cooperation instead of conquest. They want to understand how we did it. Hyun-Soo smiled. Schedule a meeting, but not just with human leaders. Bring representatives from all the major species. If we're going to represent this galaxy to the wider universe, we should do it together. 3 days later, a builder's ship arrived at Nexus Prime. It was beautiful and terrible, larger than most space stations, made of materials that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. When it spoke, its voice resonated through space itself, without using radio waves. We greet the young galaxy, the ship said. We have watched your species rise and fall for eons. Most achieve power through violence and domination. You are the first to achieve it through unity and growth. In the council chamber, delegates from dozens of species listened in awed silence. Even the holdout groups had come to hear what the ancient beings had to say. We offer you membership in the greater community, the builder continued. There are thousands of galaxies, millions of species, all working together to understand the universe and prepare for what lies beyond it. Hyun-Soo stood up. We are honored by your offer, but we must ask, what lies beyond? The builder's ship pulsed with colors that had no names. Eventually, this universe will end. The stars will burn out. Space will expand until atoms themselves drift apart, and everything we have built will fade into darkness. But if enough species work together, if enough knowledge is gathered, we might find a way to survive even that. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. The petty conflicts that had dominated galactic politics for millions of years suddenly seemed meaningless. Faced with the ultimate challenge, every species would need to contribute their unique strengths. Commander Veltar stood up. What do you need from us? Proof that your cooperation is real, the builder replied. We have seen too many alliances collapse when faced with true challenges. Show us that your unity can survive difficulties, and we will teach you technologies that will transform your understanding of reality itself. Over the following months, the galaxy faced its first real test. The builders presented a series of challenges that required different species to work together in ways they never had before. Crystalline computational abilities combined with human creativity to solve mathematical problems that had puzzled ancient minds for eons. Plasma Lord energy control merged with gas giant atmospheric manipulation to terraform hostile worlds in days instead of centuries. Even the holdout species were gradually drawn into the projects. The bioforms discovered that their understanding of life processes was crucial for creating sustainable environments. The Machine Collective found that their logical thinking complemented human intuition perfectly. Most importantly, the challenges required every species to share their most closely guarded secrets. Technologies that had been hoarded for millions of years were freely given to others. Knowledge that had been restricted to elite castes was made available to all. The process was not always smooth. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and occasional conflicts. But each time problems arose, human mediators worked patiently to find solutions that everyone could accept. After a year of testing, the builders announced their verdict. You have passed, the ancient ship declared. Your cooperation is real and deep. Your unity is based on mutual respect rather than forced submission. You are ready to join the greater community. The celebration lasted for weeks. Across the galaxy, beings who had once considered each other enemies now worked side by side on projects that would benefit everyone. Human leadership had proven itself not through force, but through the ability to bring out the best in others. In his private office, Prime Minister Hyun-Soo looked out at the stars and thought about Ambassador Dong-min, who had walked away from the old council 75 years ago. The man had said that humanity would learn to stand alone, but what they had really learned was how to help others stand together. The galaxy was no longer divided between superior and inferior species. Instead, it had become a community where every being's unique abilities were valued and used. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had taught it how to conquer itself, and this was only the beginning. Beyond their galaxy lay countless others, filled with species that faced the same ultimate challenge. The universe was vast and cold and ultimately finite, but intelligence working together might find ways to transcend even those limits. The humans had departed in silence when they were weak. They had returned openly when they were strong. Now they would lead the galaxy forward into a future that none of them could imagine alone, but all of them might achieve together. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, the belief that no problem was too big to solve if enough people worked on it with good intentions and open minds. The galaxy had learned that lesson well. It was ready for whatever came next.